It was good. It was good.
Brian would not like this time.
No?
I don't think. Well, he might be actually rooting for Jayhawks tonight. This is my tribute to my team.
No, Stone's a Duke guy.
Yeah, and that's a Brian.
Well, right.
Duke guy.
Brian Stone?
Yeah.
He's a Duke.
So he wouldn't vote. He wouldn't root for North Carolina if they're playing Kansas.
I would for $6,000.
Right.
That's true. This is very true.
Just a couple things on the agenda tonight, huh?
We'll jam it in before he leaves.
Jim's claiming 10.
I said 11.
Anything 10:01 or over, Jim loses dinner next.
I've heard 11 and a 10.
I turn into a pumpkin at 9:30. So
9:30. I go to bed.
yeah, I know. Like literally, I get home at 7 normally. We feed the kids, give them a bath. They go to bed. I go to bed. Okay. Because I can't adult any further.
He was getting pizza
Yeah.
when I left.
Huh?
You need it.
Go get him.
Really work sessions that you did.
I was just going to come get you, Fred.
All right, let's go ahead and get started with the City of Evans work session. First item on the agenda is the staff temporary workplace plan. We'll hear from staff.
Thank you, Mayor. Council is aware of this need as we've been talking about the increasing pressure on both our existing police station space and also as we've been able to restore positions and add a few coming out of COVID, we're now feeling significant workspace pressure on our general administrative areas as well. So we have to do something. We know that we have about 3 years, give or take, of temporary workspace need. If you're working in the space, it might not feel quite so temporary, but 3 years of bridge that we need until we likely will have a new police station and we'll be renovating our existing police station for our larger administrative space, which is anticipated to be enough and support us for our longer term future. So with that, we've been scratching our heads lots thinking of where we can, have office staff, where we can have staff work in ways that are comfortable, but also cost effective. And Julie Rader, our administrative service director, has been leading that discussion from a policy standpoint. She'll lead our presentation tonight. And Jen Monty, who's responsible for our facilities operations, has been kind of moving in on the logistics and moving front. So she's here to help with that part and with answer any questions. I'll just finish my overview by saying direction and guidance to staff. Our guiding points have been that since this is not forever, this is 3 years, we wanted to avoid renting space, which you'll hear more about, paying rent on top of our existing space. So optimize our existing space that we have, avoid paying rent, avoid construction of hard walls, and keep things as temporary as we can with the hope that we can use any of the fixtures that we have to acquire now ultimately in our space that we'll have in probably 3 years. So with that, I'm going to ask Julie to give a little more overview, and we'd like to just hear any questions that you might have. We just want you to have this because there will be a budget impact, and we'll want to bring that back to you. But we feel like we're doing this about as cost effectively as we can.
Thanks, Jim. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. So staff has met with the departments in order to understand what their needs would be over the next 2 to 3 years. And, as Jim had mentioned, it being kind of a unique time period in which once a police facility is built, then there would be some opportunity to expand within the Evans Community Complex to fit those kind of more longer term needs within the departments. So in the short term, staff is recommending to optimize our current facility space and more fully utilize other existing city facility space and over this next 2 to 3 year time period. And we really do feel that this is the most cost-effective option that we're going to be presenting to you, given these unique temporary circumstances. And so this recommendation proposal impacts primarily 4 different work groups: human resources and risk management, neighborhood services, IT, and the police department. So we're recommending the following workspace models. So the first would be the Riverside, use of the Riverside Library and Cultural Center. And so transitioning 4 full-time HR and risk management staff members from the Evans Community Complex over to Riverside Library and Cultural Center. In order to utilize the previous space that happens to be there, there's main entry space on the right-hand side of the main entry, which was previously the police department substation location, along with an office and copy room space that's there that was previously used for storage. And so then the cost anticipated for the use of that space is about $12,000 for furnishings and additional internet service upgrade that would be needed there. Secondly, the First Avenue space, former the wastewater administration building. And so it would be, that's located, if you don't know, at 3323rd First Avenue. And so the transition of 3 neighborhood services staff to that First Avenue transition building, administration building, and to utilize that existing office, there's an office over there, as well as creating 6 cubicle workstations over in the former wastewater laboratory area. And this would allow even a little bit of extra workspace for the future if there's any future short-term needs that would occur. So the estimated expense would be $33,000 for additional furnishings and additional services that would be needed to convert that into additional office space. Next would be the community complex plans room, and to convert the existing plans room into 3 workstations. And so over the course of several months, staff has been scanning and digitizing plans and records in order to be able to utilize that plans room and to kind of repurpose that into office space. The estimated cost would be about $11,000, and that would be for furnishings and additional services such as removing a plans table and cubbies, along with doing some additional painting. And then other Evans Community Complex transitions would be, we're recommending IT staff to move into what would be the vacated neighborhood services location. And that is located over kind of across from the Cottonwood room, Oak rooms, and then thus that would vacate space that the IT staff was in the lower level basement of this complex to allow for 8 sworn police officers. So that would be then directly above the police station, so there would be convenience there for that. The estimated cost for that expense is $25,950, and so that would be for additional furnishings and services, and including there would be an additional security door there that would be needed for police, some additional soundproofing, locksmith, and things of that nature. And then lastly, cubicle workspace installation. So for all of the locations that were mentioned thus far, moving logistics and other minor facility improvements, estimated expense would be $11,430. And so additional, thoughts have gone into other locations, and Jim kind of mentioned it. We had looked at Envision as an opportunity to lease that space, and the cost.
The building next door.
Right. Yeah. So for those of you that are not familiar with that, and the estimated cost that we had received would be about $29,000 a year. So that'd be about $87,000 for 3 years, and that wouldn't include any additional furnishings, any additional IT needs, and there would be additional needs that would be unmet that would need to be configured into this facility in some fashion. Looking at mobile building, bringing in a 70 by 28 mobile office for a 3-year contract would be about $40,000 per year. So that's about $120,000 for 3 years. And thus, once again, there would be additional furnishings that would be needed as well associated with that option, IT services, and other furnishings that would be needed. So thus, we really do feel that this would be the most cost-effective option associated with meeting the needs that the departments have. So the estimated expense for the total project, $93,380. And next steps would be providing support, would be to order the materials needed from the vendors, develop an implementation plan to include what that kind of sequencing would be, and the timing associated with the applicable departments and the divisions for moving, but anticipated the project completion would be mid-June. So tonight we're seeking basically information that you may have, feedback that you may have, address any questions, as well as seeking your direction to proceed.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments about their idea? I think it's great.
I have a question. Have we looked into like a hybrid model, having some people work from home? Based off all these needs, is there a possibility that instead of having to have people located in certain areas, I guess my question should be, do staff that need to kind of relocate have to be in-house? Are they able to have like a hybrid version where we can have like a place where we can have kind of like I guess I don't know how IT calls it, but they call it like that hotel, like where they have like if you come in, then you can just plug in. That model maybe.
Yep.
Have we looked into that?
Yes.
I mean, or do they need to be in-house?
This recommendation works well with a hybrid kind of working model. It would be harder to make all of these cubes work because there's in some cases smaller space. If these work units were all going to be in the office or had to be there 40 hours, you might give an example of what we're already doing in human resources with some kind of flexible space.
Yeah, so using kind of the PD, former PD substation as an example of having two staff members in there and also having a temporary help. And so technically having one staff member work 2 days remotely, another staff member working 3 days remotely, along with a temp. And so in essence, thus being able to carry on with like team meetings that need to occur, other confidential meetings that may need to occur. And so we are definitely taking into consideration those types of options of remote work in addition to this staffing plan.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Thank you.
Neighborhood services.
Yeah.
It's good to have a cube because they have email, lots of reports and databases to work from, but they're also out in the community a lot. Right. So I think it's easier to flex into less ideal space than they might have, with an understanding that they're going to have flexible work, operationally.
Awesome. No, thank you. I appreciate you guys are looking into that. I'm sure you are all ready. I just wanted to ask. Awesome.
Fred, you have anything?
Yes, I'm glad that we're using existing unused space in the buildings. And do you have a comment about Envision? That's a little bit off the record, I guess, or outfield. The school district at one time said that building, needed to be replaced. And, I think something like 20 years later, we're still using it. So it's kind of interesting.
Thanks, Fred.
Just quickly, where are we anticipating this impact on the budget?
This will come from we'll be bringing to you recommendations. We have carryover projects from last year. We also have, fortunately, net positive news in terms of budget savings that we had from last year and revenues that came in higher. So these will be part of that recommendation for use of that carryover.
Perfect. Thank you.
Or anything, Mark?
No, I'm in favor of it. I mean, I'm glad that we're, maximizing our space as much as we can, and growth is a good thing to have. I mean, obviously, we need the staffing to and the growth that we have, so I'm in favor of it.
Looks great. Good job on working on that.
Thanks.
I did have one more question. I apologize. Completed by June. Are we sure on deliverables? I just know that we've encountered some pretty strong supply chain issues, and so I just want to be confident in the costs and the delivery time there.
Please answer that.
Yeah, I think our biggest piece of all of this is the workspaces themselves. The vendor that we're recommending, their timeline's about 4 to 5 weeks out. And so the mid-June is kind of encapsulating a little bit of extra.
We're going to push send tomorrow.
Yeah,
This
that's
goes
great. That was my hope.
with
Yeah.
council's direction.
For all the IT stuff too, because I know we're
Oh yeah.
bad
Yeah,
luck
for
here with
this-
the IT stuff.
Right. This equipment we understand is more basic, and Xfinity, our internet provider, has indicated that they can meet these timelines. So,
Thank you.
What else? Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Next item is the American Rescue Plan funds allocation.
Thank you, Mayor. As Jackie, our finance director, approaches to join here, I will start just by saying Jackie has been paying close attention through many iterations of temporary guidance from the federal government on the American Rescue Act, American Rescue Plan Act. That's Arpa, and has been watching lots of various iterations of temporary guidance on how this money can be used and how the federal government will be expecting reporting on this. Jackie has enough experience with reporting on federal funds that we really want to be cautious for those kinds of follow-up requirements that can come several years later. So now, just recently, those guidelines were made quote-unquote final, and so we have options for council. Our goal tonight is to hear your direction on how we can best plan at this point to use those ARPA funds. You'll see that the options generated are really for our large projects for which we might not have alternative funding sources for. This money could really come in handy to help us to move these projects forward. So with that, I'll ask Jackie to give an overview of the kind of how ARPA works and the options that we have.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Happy to finally have that quote-unquote final guidance, to have recommendations, and for us to be able to proceed with a direction on this. We have had some money for some time, and it feels like time to get it to work. This is a reminder of what that initial preliminary final, I think is what they were calling it, which is really fun. Guidance at that point, about a year ago, we had heard there were 6 main categories for recommending usage of ARPA. I won't go into the details of them. I think the one that we talked about primarily last time we spoke on this topic was that replacement of public sector lost revenue. I think it was council's desire at that point to ensure we knew what all the strings were attached in that and pursue that opportunity as much as possible to recover that money to our general fund. And they heard that loud and clear from many communities. So they did do a few things with this final rule change. They did broaden the usage of some of these categories, which we'll talk about in a second. One of those being that revenue replacement or revenue loss category. They heard, wow, this is really complicated. It was a very strict set of calculations to determine what that exact dollar amount entities could continue to recapture as that lost revenue. We had done that. There were good tools. They were complicated, but good tools. We had done those calculations, and we were prepared to have that dollar amount in hand. What they heard, though, is a lot of communities varied in how they arrived at those calculations, the factors that went into them. And so U.S. Treasury has recommended a $10 million standard allowance, if you will. So awards up to $10 million you could take in entirety as revenue recapture, even if when we did the calculation, it was about $1.4 million of revenue loss to our general fund. We can still choose for our entire $5.3 million award to be used under this revenue recapture. So it's giving a lot of flexibility to especially smaller communities. It also encourages some lacks of some of the most stringent reporting requirements. So if you're one of these smaller entities, they're calling them non-entitlement units, meaning we get our money not from U.S. Treasury direct, but through the state distributed to us. Those kind of smaller entities then have some easier reporting requirements, to say it quite frankly, where those larger awards will have more detailed expenditure requirements. Larger infrastructure projects will have detailed need documentation of why you needed this, why it is a result of the pandemic impacts, and why a community really needed it to recover. So the small entities really are at an advantage at this point for some of these reporting opportunities. The final rule also gave some flexibility in the continued infrastructure investments. The categories of water, sewer, broadband, and storm drainage continue to be allowable and encouraged opportunities as well, although they might have more reporting requirements than the revenue loss piece. So that was kind of exciting for us. The other categories were kind of broken down into 4 as opposed to 6 in that first slide. They're bringing everything as responding to the pandemic as both public health and economic impacts. If you could say we needed this because of COVID-19, then it kind of all fits into that bucket, whether it's individual assistance. A lot of counties have a lot of other needs for what they did in response to that public health emergency. Premium pay, they kind of left as their own bucket there. Again, that infrastructure for water, sewer, and broadband, and then revenue replacement. We are required as a non-entitlement unit, one of those smaller entities, to submit a report to U.S. Treasury by the end of April, indicating our intent with this money, what the city chooses to do, what our plan moving forward with this money is, which is one of the reasons we're talking about it tonight. And so we've developed a few different options for council to consider as we're talking about this. You could say, great, our award is $5.3 million. It's under the $10 million standard allowance. We're going to keep all of that as general revenue recapture for the provision of governmental services. There's really just a few items that they're specifically excluding from the term governmental services. It's things like you can't pay down debt, you can't put it into pension funds, you can't pay off legal settlements, some very, very specific things. Otherwise, though, if you had dollar amounts that you were spending in your community to further your government services, there's some pretty broad latitude for how you interpret that. You could potentially keep some of that in the general fund under that revenue recapture, and you could choose to allocate a portion of it then to an infrastructure or water, sewer, broadband project. Or option 3 would be to say, never mind, we don't want any of it in the general fund, and we want it all to go to, a larger capital project or multiple capital projects. We, as staff, had a meeting to brainstorm what some of our large project needs were, and I'm sure it'll come as no surprise we came up with $100 million in about 3 minutes. I think Jim's initial list was even longer than this. He may have even taken a couple of things off. But as we continue to talk about what are the needs, how are they being funded, what available resources exist for some of these projects, we came up with this list. And one project that continues to rise to the top is a sewer main extension at 49th Street. We have it estimated at about a $6 million project cost. I always look at a mark when I say numbers, and I know that there might be inflationary factors to see if he twitches, but it was probably higher than that already. We know that there's limited cash balance in the wastewater fund. While that fund is sufficient, we have lots of plans, including a plant expansion on the list. So there is some constraint on the fund for wastewater. We've talked about then that expansion. We know that at this point we would probably have to issue debt. Our current rate model anticipates today's rates being able to pay for the debt that we will be incurring when we build that station or that plant, sorry. That's also a large need, of course. Our police station is another one that we've spoken about recently. We do anticipate paying down the debt with our food tax on that project. At council's previous meeting, we talked about a range of $2 to $5 million to put down on that project to help reduce the amount of interest that we would pay over the life of that loan as well. We have a few other projects there, retail amenities park at 37th and 35th that could be a really big impact for the city. We're investigating use of park impact funds for that project. And there may be a developer component. There may be some other sources of funds that may be available for that project. Widening of 37th Street. We have quite a few of our road project funds contributing into those projects. We're always looking for additional grant opportunities. There's other infrastructure money possibly coming as opportunities. So I feel like there's maybe other funds that could be used for those road projects. We have a couple of projects I've listed as kind of the timeline incompatible. So of this ARPA money, while there's broad latitude on how we're able to spend it, we do have to have all of the costs obligated by the end of 2024 and fully paid out by the end of 2026. So we may run into projects that are high priority, but are they shovel ready? Can we get them? Do we have staff capacity to run and manage these projects? Some of those timelines may not be compatible for usage of this funds. And then the last one on there, skipped over second to last, is a cul-de-sac at State Street and 31st Street. I have about $1.5 million of costs listed there, and we're still looking into the potential to fund that through the ERA and feel that maybe ARPA funds aren't the best source of financing for that project. So again, as always, there's more needs and more ideas and plans than we have money, but I think that gave us a sense of maybe what some of those higher priorities might be. Additionally, there are some capital project constraints that I want council to be aware of for projects that are infrastructure in nature. We do still have to show that we're meeting prevailing wage requirements for this ARPA money. So while Davis-Bacon is not an actual requirement, which is where that prevailing wage comes in, we don't have to do those certifications. We do have to show that the contractors working on these jobs are meeting some salary minimums. So the work is still there, even though the work isn't quite there. It's an interesting piece there. And then capital projects over $1 million may have additional justification needs, as I mentioned, of how was your community impacted during the pandemic, and why do you really need this? I know of a lot of other communities are using it for, you name it, and I'm sure you can probably pick a local community that is using that. There are additional requirements and additional risk, I think, in the rules changing what they expect for documentation and how we can show we use this money, years from now looking back. As we talked about, there may be some better or alternative funding sources for some of these projects. And then the timeline again, trying to get as much of this obligated and spent by the end of 24, I think is advantageous to the city. The sooner we can use the money, report on it, do our required reporting, and move on, I think is helpful. The longer you draw it out, in my experience, it feels like more rules come. Then they want additional forms if they have time to develop them. And we do have half the money already. So we anticipate getting the second half. 12 months after the first is all they've ever said. So later this summer, we should get the additional $2.6 million. So we have half of that sitting in its own bank account, earning interest, waiting for us to do something with it. Going back to that revenue replacement thought process, that how we would use it for provision of governmental services, we also brainstormed some of the larger chunks, the larger costs that we had in the general fund. I also think that it makes the most sense to point to as many large chunks of items as we can to show how we would use this money rather than 100 small things. That really is just adding additional reporting, tracking, monitoring requirements, the smaller dollar amounts that we choose to spend this money on. About halfway in that chart, if you'll hone in there, $2.3 million was a quick way to get to what we think 2022 and 2023 governmental costs could be just from looking at our transfers to CIP streets for our road maintenance, that $600,000 transfer each year. The amount of money that we would contribute to the fire protection district in 2022 and 23, both listed there, as well as our next 2 years costs towards the Greeley-Evans Transit Program. Right away, that gets us to our half of the award, the amount of money that we have sitting in the bank today. We could continue to identify the items that we're spending out of the general fund if council wanted to show on our reporting and take advantage of Treasury's recommendation to capture as much of that as possible into the general fund under that revenue recapture category. We could continue to go and get pretty easily to that $5.3 million. I was on a lot of webcasts and conversations, both from U.S. Treasury directly, as well as some other accounting firms that are trying to help entities navigate through this. And even Treasury, that last bullet there is really, really important to me. They're encouraging our size small communities to take advantage of these reporting requirements that could be a little bit lessened at this point.
So since you can tell that I have something to say,
Yeah.
for council, I would say it's important. This is how we would report to the federal government, for instance, on those things at the top of the table that effectively free up about $2.3 million from our current budget. These are things that are already in our budget that would help. Shouldn't be taken lightly, but help us sleep better at night, knowing that we're reporting very solidly in the way that the Treasury wants us to. So you'll see that in a recommendation, we have about $3 million, we've got some that could go toward a utility project that is covered outside of this revenue recapture. This helps us to build our reporting plan for Treasury, showing that we use that money for general government purposes, effectively freeing up this money in our current budget to do whatever you want with it beyond that.
Yeah.
For capital projects that we think are government services, but we want to be really tight with what Treasury wants us to report.
Thank you for clarifying that. And they even went so far as to say, even if your plan is to ultimately, maybe years down the road, you think that money might be spent on one of the other categories of projects, take advantage of that opportunity to report as simply as possible. I think it also helps Treasury. If they have less detailed expense reports coming their way, and we have to report less detailed, the burden is minimized on both ends. So they're saying, take advantage of that opportunity if you can.
A secondary policy decision.
Right.
Probably, you can focus on the big stuff you want to do, and this kind of listing will help us to report in a way that we're very solid about Treasury's report.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you for helping that. So with that, then, what that would look like in how we would actually use that money. If you're comfortable with us, reporting that way to U.S. Treasury, being very clear in intent of recapturing as much back under that revenue recapture category as possible, it does free up resources then that council can allocate towards other projects. What that might look like as an option is to allocate $2 million of that money then directly towards that 49th Street sewer expansion or extension. We had a $6 million cost on the big $100 million slide there. Even $2 million would allow us to look at continuing this project. We do have $5.9 million in our system expansion component of our wastewater fund, that could be used for this. There's also a possibility for some partial recovery from development when that were to happen that would help reimburse the city at that point. But it's up to us to help build that expansion to ensure that the services are continued south of 49th Street to enable that development to come. So $2 million would absolutely help this project take off. And then we could continue to keep that $3.3 million, the remainder of our award, in the general fund. That would free up the resources for us to look at giving, that amount, as we talked last time, to the police station. That's within that $2 to $5 million range right away. We also have additional fund balance, available fund balance we could look at that point of how much we wanted to give to the police station. But this would achieve both of those.
So on that 3.3 million, for instance, if we already have $2 million in our general fund balance, and council wanted to use this additional 3.3, that would get us up to about $5.3 million for the down payment or cash payment to plan for the police station.
And I think that's it for slides. I know threw a couple of things at you. I'd appreciate Jim recapping kind of the two-part direction that we were looking for.
So since there's $100 million plus of needs, and you may even have others, we wanted to at least try to land on a recommendation that we think addresses the high priorities that we have and could be an allocation of that $5.3 million. But I don't want to short council's conversation. If there are other projects that you would like to consider using ARPA money for, that's certainly what we'd like to hear. Or if you think that that's a pretty good balance, we can move forward with that. Concludes our remarks.
Thank you. Anyone have questions of staff or comments about this topic?
I do.
Go ahead, Laura.
The 49th Street widening project. Is that, I'm sorry, the 49th Street sewer project. Are we connecting then different neighborhoods that are not connected with that?
That, I might ask Randy or Mark to come forward and just talk about what that could look like. But I will start by saying that will advance, it'll upsize lines that we currently need to, upsize for service to the areas that we already have. But it also helps us extend service to new areas like Reamer Lake, like the potential other properties out there that we know we're going to need to serve. And then, those properties would pay us back for connection to that sewer line as they come on board. Mark, do you have anything else to say? Councilmember, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good enough, because my concern with doing the 49th Street sewer line is that if we're widening it and adding more sewer to an already overtaxed wastewater treatment center at this time, it probably isn't a good idea in my opinion. That's just the point I want to make on that. I just think that might be something to put into service and into fruition when we expand the wastewater treatment plant. The other thing I wanted to say was I just wanted to say that I kind of had a little leaning to closing off and doing the cul-de-sac over there on 31st, just because we seem to have a lot of problem with people wanting to develop that corner, because we do have to close that street off, which has been in the works for 50 years. And if we actually did that like we did over on the northwest corner, that we would probably draw more attention to that lot and actually get a sale and development on that lot.
One, comment on yours, Councilmember. The 49th Street sewer line will ultimately serve all of the development in that area, and it's likely going to take far longer than the 3 to 5 years that will take to be expanding the wastewater treatment plant. The wastewater utility plan, which is the first step toward that plant expansion, we're collecting proposals now on that. That'll help us address the sizing for the whole system. So clarifying the size of treatment plant that we need long term, this sewer main, lift stations, all of that we're going to need to serve, and then fund with development revenue will be advised in those plans. We know that we're going to need a sewer line. We're going to need to have. There's going to be development happening out to the west that can already be accommodated in our plant. We're not over capacity on our treatment plant at this point, but that development can be accommodated within our current plant. We just don't have a sewer main out there for that now. And this will take some time. We just need to be anticipating what's coming.
And I guess my point is actually spending money on a project that's going to bring us in revenue would actually be more beneficial, because then we would get that revenue so that we could do more projects in the future. Spending the money on the sewer line, I understand that we're eventually going to have the houses hooked to it, but we won't have the revenue coming from somebody who might be developing.
Well, we would, I think, though. Maybe I'm off. We put that, basically the way I see it with that sewer line project, we're fronting the money to put the line in. And then as those houses develop out there, they pay the impact fees and pay it back. And then there again is the money we have again.
Correct.
We're just kind of fronting it.
Yeah, and that's, for me, it's years down the line. We've approved this development on the west side of Prairie View, and that hasn't happened. So, you know, I'm just saying that it would be more beneficial to have something that's gonna probably happen and replenish our coffers before, or earlier.
And I totally agree with what you're saying. I'm personally for doing the sewer line, because then once somebody does want to come develop, we're like, yep, we're ready. Let's go tie into it. We're good to go. So I like planning. I think planning for the future now is the way to go. But I understand what you're saying. Other comments or questions?
Jackie, when you're talking about the transfers to the fire protection district and all that, you're saying we probably need to do that to use the money we have already received, so that we don't risk losing it. And this is a good, and then we can put that the savings or redo the budget and put that into an account for, say, the fire, not fire, the police station.
Right. It frees up resources on those items we know we're going to have to pay, like the contribution to the fire district. And so those resources then you could be allocating to something else, like towards the police station. Absolutely.
But that definitely simplifies the accounting on the whole deal.
It does.
And we don't have to worry about time constraints because it's already done. We can take that money out of the budget and put it into a special earmarked fund for, say, the police station or whatever.
Essentially, yes. Yep.
There's a word that's normally a bad word in grant discussions: supplanting. Funny, you're already planning to spend. They were actually encouraging that.
Yeah, this
which
grant
is
source
weird.
is very, very unusual. Yeah.
So,
And it's because of the simplified reporting. Because they're like, less work for me, please. You know?
Yeah,
So
exactly. It works for
we
both.
allow you to. So I'm good for how we're going to be reporting that simplified reporting. I think that's great. Is encouraged. So let's do that. I like the fact that we then can utilize the money for other things that we prioritize. And I like the highest, priority emerging, which is the 49th sewer issue. As I echo, the comments the mayor mentioned, I do agree with that. So that's all I have. So I'm for that.
I have one more.
Yeah.
With what Councilwoman Spear has said, I would like to have a discussion when the next time we have an ERA meeting over that, because I've looked at the Rander's Diner property over, and I feel that if we could come up with a way to do the cul-de-sac and do the street, or say this is how we designed this workaround street on this property, and then the property owner or the potential future property owner will know exactly what the property is going to look like that he can build on. And my suggestion would be the southern and the eastern boundary. And the eastern boundary has already got a cutout to 32nd Street, right there near the fence line. So I think that would work the best. And then whoever takes a look at the property knows exactly where the street's going to be and how it's going to look if he decides to build there.
Mark, Amanda, Tammy?
Yeah, I have some questions. So my biggest concern is with the rising cost of construction and increasing interest rates. I would like to ensure we get the biggest bang for our buck here. So from a reporting standpoint, fine. I don't know that I agree with what they're saying, but I'm not making those rules. They are. It's just hard to justify that to the public. So that's not a topic for discussion right now. Beyond that, though, I think my main concern is really honing in on how we are going to pay for future projects and understanding really the present value of $1. And so if we move forward as explained and contribute $2 million to the sewer system expansion, how would we fund that expansion without that money? And when would we fund that?
That would be depending on the sewer fund. It would probably take longer. I know, Jackie, you can talk about the cursory look that you did. There are several $1 million that are unallocated for projects that I'll let.
No, you're exactly
Choose
right. I think it would take a significant amount of the available fund balance of the overall fund if we had to spend the entire $6 million. Possibly would have to delay the project a year or two while some additional resources were built up for that project. Or I don't have the fund balance on mind offhand.
Sure.
But I think it would make, even the $2 million kind of takes it from what might be a manageable spend out of that fund and where we still have excess reserves and we still have ample reserves for other projects, to that $2 million could really make or break the difference of being able to do it in the next year or two. So just the timing component, I think, is the biggest.
Sure. And then do we understand the impact that $2 million would have on the long-term debt associated with the police station? Like if we finance $2 million, what is that going to look like?
Yeah, I wish I would have had that. At the last council meeting, we looked at the various levels between putting down $2 million and $5 million.
Yeah, and I think you and I discussed
that.
And
I think it saved like $3 million, if I recall correctly, over the lifetime of the loan by paying that down over the 20 years.
If we paid the additional $2 million down, it would save us $3 million over the life of the loan.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Well, we were talking about $3 million, weren't we? Or was it 2?
This is my struggle. I just wonder if it's more advantageous to put it all to the police station. And in fact, I don't think we have to answer that right now. I think you report it as stated, but I would like to further understand how we utilize those funds that fall to the bottom. If we could see a cash flow that shows that projection, and I apologize, Jackie, no, you gave that to me and you and I went over that on that Teams call, but if we could look at the future cash flow there and then have a better understanding of if those funds stayed in the sewer fund, even if we used those, maybe revenue recapture could happen more quickly in the sewer fund. Or if we waited a year, is the cost of that sewer project exponentially higher? What I'm trying to decide is it more advantageous to save that money in future debt? Or because if the sewer project only ends up costing us $500,000 more, but we save $3 million in interest, I'd much rather do that. That's what I'm looking for.
So you're saying put 7 on the, because we were talking about going up to 5 on the police.
We were doing 5, and that the interest cost would be $8.5 million over the life of the loan. And then it said the general fund could reduce annual debt service to $1.3 million.
If we put 5 down, but wasn't there a smaller amount?
There was the less than $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
The annual debt service estimated 1.5, interest cost of $10 million over the life of the loan.
See, and that's where I look at it and go, I'd rather the full ARPA money go toward reduction of the police station, because I do think even if we were delayed a year, I anticipate cost of construction at 12% increase per annum, which I understand is a lot, but I would love to know those scenarios, because I do think it may be more advantageous to utilize that for that debt than it would be to peel a portion of that out for that sewer project.
I mean, if you look at just the quantity itself, I mean,
yeah,
clearly it's going to be.
And particularly because we can recover the cost of the sewer line through impact fees, and we can't recover as easily that cost that we would save in interest.
I think you are probably correct on a cash flow standpoint. I think we would come back to council with additional cash flow, looking at the total sewer fund, so that we can, if council also has a goal to meet development that's happening out west, it's going to be even tighter, and it will take some more time for us to have funding for the 49th Street sewer line. If we don't have either ARPA or potentially another source to help us meet with that, what today we think is a $6 million cost. And I would say also, we don't have any design yet on that sewer line.
Right.
So, tonight you can almost look at as priorities for allocation today. And I think the questions council's asking, we need longer conversations on and what probably assistance from our analyst on the police station debt, and also looking at potential sources for growth-related sewer lines.
Right, and I would, Jackie, you and I had this conversation, but interest rates are changing rapidly. So as soon as we can secure that police station debt, I would like to do it. And having said that, I would love to find resolve to this matter rapidly. I know we've already got a pretty good outline on the police station debt, but if we could find, even if you look at it and go, yeah, we already know based off of these scenarios that it would be most advantageous to do this and put it at the police station or whatever that might be. But I am concerned about the rising cost of interest and rising cost of construction, particularly around the police station. So I'm in favor of putting the ARPA funds in as expected, letting it fall to the bottom line, but then I'd like to, I would prefer to make a decision in the coming weeks on the rest of that resolve, just because interest rates are
So
changing
then that would
rapidly.
be like, so it'll be the 2 plus the, what is it, 5 point, the ARPA funds, what is it?
5.3 million.
5.3, so then it would be 7.3 million.
Would it, or would it be 5.5?
Well, because we add the 2 million, right?
Right. If council chooses to use the entire 5.3 million, allocate that to more cash payment on the police station, then we have the amount that has been allocated in the general fund balance, 2 million plus the ARPA money would get you about 7.3, and we just wouldn't have the funding for the.
So at the last work session, we said it was a 2, and if we decided to do another 3 million, that would bring us to 5, and that would have been the full initially. But now we're discussing it at its entirety, so that would be 7.3 million versus 5.
I would just like to know that if we can. If Jim and Melissa can run that or whatever, that'd be great.
Anyone else?
And then we're going to get
I'm in favor of that, allocating the full amount to the police station.
and that's shovel ready. If we, I mean, in essence, I mean, granted, we have to go and do all the process, but that'll be a quick thing to get going, right?
Well, with the police station, we're going to the direction to council was to issue. Since we don't know what the cost will be, we have a $25 million placeholder. Issue the amount of debt that we can at the lowest rates that we can. That would result in the debt service payment of 1.4 to 1.5 million for that fund. And then the amount above that in cash that you have, whether it's 2 million, 5 million, 7.3 million, will be applied as kind of cash payments that can help us to close any gaps or fund the rest of the police station. That would be over the amount of debt.
Okay. Anyone else?
So I'm hearing that we may need continuation.
Yeah.
We need to crunch a few more. We need to crunch the cash flow on $7.3 million cash payment on the police station. And then we'll also, I do want to bring back a look at the sewer fund. So that we can at least understand the implications for what that means in terms of timing on a potential $6 million sewer line.
Yep. But I think you move forward, reporting to ARPA.
Planning to allocate.
Correct. The simplified.
Yep.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Next item on the agenda is the Highway 85 landscape design. Yeah, we should. We might move this to after the meeting.
Right. Till later.
Good thing I have a sense of
Yeah, you're the only one. Love. But we are coordinated on that.
color coordinated.
Okay, so council's aware we have had long-term vision for landscaping of the 85 corridor that would help us enhance some of our corners and would, ideally and hopefully incentivize more development along the corridors and to help us probably ultimately recover that cost. This is the other item that has been kind of sitting in our general fund planning. Council had $2 million of funding allocated prior to COVID for Highway 85 landscaping. That amount was pulled back when we went through all of stripped out the budget for once we were into COVID, took that out of the fund balance. But at that point said that once we had this design and some actual plans, council could look at reauthorizing some of that fund balance to be used for Highway 85 landscaping, if that's still your intent. So we've been working for a number of months now on what that actual landscaping could look like and what some phasing would be. And Allison has been leading that project and will lead through kind of the work that we've done and how we might phase that and what we can act on this year and what might be future year projects.
Yep. So yes, last year we did hire Ayers and Associates. They also have a landscape design kind of division, and we've been working with them on what has really proven to be a very complex set of sites and project areas. So I kind of wanted to walk through just a little bit of where we have gone. This thing never wants to work for me. There we go. So I included just a few of the slides just as a reminder of the 2018, the Highway 85 visioning conversations that we had with the community. These were some of the images that came out of that, with those ideas being the median with some attractive landscaping, the right-of-way on the sides of the road, really making Highway 85 an attractive place to not just speed through Evans, but to actually drive through Evans. So to date, we have spent our time really clarifying our project areas. I think originally the group was looking at kind of a prototype section between 37th and 39th Street. And we stepped back and said, well, we have Quick Trip coming in and we've got the two corners that we own. And so why don't we make the 31st and Highway 85 intersection our primary focus off the top. So we looked at the four corners, we talked about the median, and then we've really dug into how all of those four corners are going to be changing in the next few years. So evaluating those timing considerations, we're looking at the city's east side stormwater improvement plans, which will probably, I think Mark is, last I heard, 2023 is kind of our target for some construction on those. And there's, as we talked about with interest, and things are changing. So knowing where this project is going to fit in with that project. Quick Trip construction, of course, is, in fact, if anybody happened to drive by today, they're tearing down the old double clutch. So construction on the Quick Trip will start this summer, and then of course we have our corner on the southwest corner, and we're still working toward that project. So then we worked on some preliminary cost estimates for each of the project areas, so that we have an idea whether or not our $2 million was a good number. And then right now we're really digging into a draft scope of work for each of those phases that we've identified. So here's the kind of the north section. You can see the Quick Trip is on the right, come and goes on the left. So this just shows the right-of-way landscaping on either side of the highway, and then the median that extends from the intersection north. There's a little red circle up at the top that we're envisioning as a welcome sign, as a kind of a monument sign into the community. And then here's the south section that shows our southwest corner, the former Eshes Market. You can see pretty clearly on there. Lots of landscaping on that particular corner. Again, we have a median that's considerably longer on the south side, and then just a small amount of landscaping potential over there on the east side. So as we looked at our preliminary cost estimates, they came up to about $1.8 million. You can see the two, we did bid out the two medians, or we just looked at both medians separately, but together they're just under $1 million. The northeast corner, or the Quick Trip corner, is under $100,000, and then northwest 126. Southwest is kind of a big one. If you go back there, you can see there's a lot going on there. So that one is anticipated to be a little more expensive. And then the last item on the list there that you see is some design and branding. One of the things that came out of our conversations with the consultants is that it makes sense for us to have kind of a theme as we're working through the three intersections along Highway 85. And so what we'd like to do is to find a way to create an umbrella, sort of a guiding document that has a way to, recommendations for private property owners and ways that we can make that look consistent as we go through the corridor. And so whether that's similar plant materials, whether it's, art elements, different things that we can, incorporate to make that look more consistent as you go through and know that you're still here in Evans. So at this time, we have kind of 6 phases that we have proposed. The overall design and branding concepts is the first one up there on the list. The most urgent is our northeast corner with Quick Trip. And the reason that it's urgent is because they're going to start construction really soon. And so we were fortunate to have a call with them last week where we approached them and said, would you be open to bidding your project along with our project together so that we could do it together in a coordinated fashion all at once? We just pay you for our portion. And they were very excited by that opportunity. We said, it'll only improve the corner and make the rest of the corner look better. And they were definitely on board with that. And then we would also like to proceed as soon as possible with the design of the 2 medians, both the north and the south. And I think one of the things that came out as we were talking about the medians is that that's the part of the project that's going to require the most traffic control, the most involvement with CDOT. And so that's really one that we want to do all at once if it's financially possible. So rather than doing it in 2 phases, we would do the medians together. And then the last 3 are less, probably less definite at this time. So the northwest corner across from Come and Go, we would want to coordinate with our own east side storm sewer projects. The southeast corner would wait until we find a buyer for that project. And then also with the southwest corner, we would proceed with more construction documents and, the ability to really plan on doing that work once we have more definitive plans with.
Once the corner's developed out and the east side storm drain project is probably complete, because that will be a big corner and will be very involved from a stormwater standpoint. But the medians, it appears we could move forward without interfering with those future stormwater projects. Certainly the northeast corner with Quick Trip, just paying them to do our portion of the project as one would probably make for a really nice corner and get it done.
Yeah.
You have any more slides?
No, well, there might be one more. Hey, look at that stuff. So yeah, proceeding now on the northeast corner and being able to just hand over plans to them and say, go build this and we'll reimburse for our portion. We'd also proceed now with construction documents and planning and bidding for the north and south medians. And then what we would create is a schematic design for the overall design and branding. That means we don't get so detailed that we're creating construction documents, but we are working with our architect to make sure that we have very clear plans that will inform. So it's kind of design is sort of the cheapest option up here, where we just kind of have general ideas, and then schematic design, and then the construction documents would be the most labor intensive. So
I would just conclude on a couple of points that I think I know council are important to council. One is that we've talked to the architects about probably very few, if any, trees in the median. We've heard council on some other areas. No trees aren't working real well in the medians. So low shrubs, of course, will be all coordinated with CDOT. We don't have CDOT buy-in on this yet. We wanted to check with council, see if we're on the right track. The consultant team has very well former CDOT landscaping people who feel like they're pretty well plugged in. drought resistant, materials, more rocks than growing things, other stuff like that. And then also we know that ultimately there will be a need for maintenance. I think based on other answers we've had, this would probably, at least the work that we do in the next couple of years at this intersection might require, in the summertime, certainly five hours or so of work per week, per 2 weeks. I don't think Scott's quite dialed in, but Scott's always the first to tell. Scott Sanders is always the first to tell us, don't forget about maintaining this. This work that we're seeing wouldn't put us over the top in terms of an entire maintenance worker or FTE, but we will be, stretching there and making things cover and probably coming back to you. It'll be one of the factors as we continue to plan maintenance staffing with the rest of our community. So those are a couple things I think are important.
And Jim, I should point out that throughout this process, we have had Mark Oberschmidt and Scott Sandridge, Randy Reedy, and Bess Johnson have all been plugged in with the architect as we've had these conversations, because we know how important that maintenance piece is, and the making sure that it meshes with all of our design standards and landscape standards for Highway 85. So there's a lot of parts.
That concludes our remarks.
So I know we've discussed this a little bit at our coordination meeting. I mean, why I'm in favor of definitely doing some landscape work and beautifying the Highway 85 corridor to definitely make it more attractive and hopefully bring in more development as well. My biggest hesitation is the roads. We're going to spend a lot of money to spruce up the place, make it look nice, but we have a crappy road. And I know that's nothing we can do. That's more of a CDOT. And I know I spoke to them at Highway 85 coalition meetings to see where that was on their radar about doing some type of mill and overlay or some kind of a chip sealing or something to make that road a little bit more attractive. And it's just not on their radar right now. And I don't know if that has something to do because that's all part of the whole spaghetti junction design and everything. So they're not really wanting to put any money towards that yet. But while I think it's my only hesitation is we're doing a lot of work for, we have a nice crappy road there. But I think something needs to be done out there. That's my hesitation.
I'd like to piggyback off of that, actually. That's the point, I think, that at hand that's really very valid. I don't know. I guess a lot would go to making it look better if even the existing medians as they were, the concrete was replaced. They have been driven over, they have been ripped up, and I don't see, again, to your point, I don't see why we would want to put in a big design project in on a road that is dilapidated and needs to be repaired, and the design project would be ripped up anyway. I would like to have it along the lines of maintenance. Maintenance and cleaning it up would go a long way. The gutters and the gutters are full of debris. The medians and the sides have weeds on them. And I agree with your point on that, but I also think that a more costly thing to do would be to, repair the medians as they stand.
Like I said, there's no right or wrong answer for me. Something needs to be done in that area, and I'm for sprucing it up for sure. But it's just, it's going to be one of those things like, oh, good, we did all this work. Yeah, we still have a nice copy. No fault of the city of Evans by any means. It's a CDOT project, but something needs to be done in that area, for sure.
Well, and I think the signs need to be replaced. They've been run over by trucks and everything. And then when you go into designing any type of medians, even the median on 42nd Street on the north side on 85 is way too far into the street. And if you try to turn left with a trailer, you end up going over the median. So I think my personal thing is, like you said, not to spend, a big wad of money with doing a lot of the you know, shrubbery and landscaping and everything in a median. But maybe just cleaning it up and repairing with some simple cement work. And cleaning it up. We need street sweeper out there.
Tammy, do you have something to add?
Yes, you know my opinion on this. I think we need to pretty it up, and maybe it would motivate CDOT to take another look at that and get the roads fixed, because they say Evans. I'm trying.
Yeah, you're right.
But they may be saying Evans is making that effort. But either way, okay, if we don't do the medians, but we need to do something along the sides. I mean, seeing some of those houses and businesses and whatnot, we need to do something to make it look better. And I agree with you, while there's not 100%, I still want to see it prettied up. I'm sorry. I've lived here for years, and Laura and I probably use that road, besides you, driving up Cheyenne the most. And it's not pretty no matter where we go through it. And I want it to be, even if they don't fix the roads, I get it. It's a crooked looking road, but we need to take pride in our city either way. You know, and if we're trying to get all this development to come in, or sell pieces of land to try to get developers in, if it looks junky, you know, are we really going to do that well? Look how long we've sat on some of these.
That's the point I was going to make. Is people aren't going to invest in our community if we're not investing.
Right.
Thank you.
So if we don't make it look good, then why would anybody have any issue coming here and trying to help our city out?
Well, and I'm not saying not make it.
I'm not saying you are. I'm not saying you're not.
I'm just saying, instead of like, big time, go big time.
But as mentioned, I mean, we don't know when those roads are going to be fixed. I mean, for all we know, they won't be fixed for like another 30 years. Who knows? The way it seems, But I mean, I think we should definitely. I agree. I think we should beautify it, because for Evans, we need to. That's a way for us to entice the businesses to come in. And how it's looking now, it's not working. Mm-hmm. And we're already getting some business within specific areas, and I feel that we need to continue to move on that vision that we have in order to continue that trend. Granted, if they get ripped up eventually some other time, hopefully then the roads will get done, and we will fix the medians again. But I don't foresee it being anytime soon. So let's get it done now and beautify the area. That's just what I think.
And that's a very specific question we can ask CDOT when we go to meet with them, to go over these plans, as what are the future plans for
As I mentioned to you, Jim, when we have our 85 coalition meeting on the 14th, bring it up again. I'm just going to keep hounding them until we get something. It would be nice to have a good collaboration with them and get it work together with that and get that done all at the same time. But I mean, I agree. Something needs to be done on that. Absolutely. It would just be nice if, we have this nice project and a nice, road to go with it. But I mean, I agree. That's my concern is we do all this work, which is great. We need it. But at the same time, it's like, sound crappy road.
I still think that A could lead to B, could lead to C, in that, we're not going to get any businesses as it stands right now, or very few. I mean, honestly, I don't like going down there. I very rarely do if I don't have to, because of that. And that sounds horrible, but it's 100% true. If we take this leap and move forward, I firmly believe that will help to draw in additional businesses, which will help to entice CDOT. I think right now CDOT's probably saying the same thing. Why would we invest our money in a project that's so dilapidated, right? And if we look at it and go, well, yes, that area is blighted, which is why we have the ERA. Let's take some of those funds. Let's put this to use, and let's get those businesses in there. And then once they're there, and there's additional traffic flow and all of that, I think CDOT has far more of a reason to invest. I've worked with CDOT for years, and it's never an easy thing, but I think we can dangle a carrot. And I think that carrot is also a big give to future businesses there. And if they look at it and go, you're right, I like what you said, Mayor Rudy, where if we're moving forward going, we care so much, we're investing in this, I firmly believe it will help to draw others.
In spite of the road.
Yeah. I think that's the step we can take. And so, in my opinion, I would like to see us utilize the funds as outlined. I think it would be most advantageous for future growth.
and development. And I do think it's a step in the right direction. Maybe a leap of faith, but I think it's a good one.
Well, I think Mark could probably back me up on this, both Marks, that whoever cries the loudest with CDOT is, and usually it's the bigger population areas, that's where the money goes and to do the repairs. I don't know whether there's some kind of a middle ground between what Laura's proposing, where you clean it up first maybe and put in some drought tolerant plantings and go from there and see, and get it spruced up where it looks nice without maybe putting, going whole hog like she said, until we find out what the heck CDOT's going to do with it.
To be clear, I'm not saying don't do anything.
Right.
I'm saying, let's not build rainbow bridges and, and spend $200,000 on a big long piece of artwork that goes through the whole entire thing. I'm just to be torn up later. I agree with getting it, I don't want to be paved in gold right now because we hopefully might someday have to probably remove some of it to put in, and new construction on a road is going to last some of our nice little cement sidewalks and everything that we will have to end up replacing. But so I'm not saying just let's just mow it and sweep. I'm saying let's not get the Golden Highway in there.
And Councilmember, if I may, I think your suggestion there is something we should explore on the other corners throughout the corridor now. We should be doing that, and I think this is still, and that we can engage more with CDOT on that, and they may be more incentivized to repair what they already have with concrete and things like that. If we're talking to them about this corner, which, frankly, when we look at all three corners that we have, this is a pilot for us and will help us to evaluate what those medians feel like. If we move forward with this intersection medians. But I just want to say, I think we need to be doing that next level of maintenance, repair, and work with CDOT anyway.
Yeah, I get sick and tired of sitting there at the light, and looking at the median, and it's just, rubble right now. And to even just have the median taken out and brand new cement put in there instead of, the dilapidated rubble falling apart would be fantastic. And bent over signs and bent over, it's bad. And to make that point, we on the east side, we got all new curbs, all new what are those corner cans or whatever. They're dipped out for handicap accessible, and then we've got a nice shellacking of overlay, and man, oh man, it spruced it up. So if we can do that at least on part of it, while we make this north side look really nice, it would be great.
Anyone else? Does that give you enough direction?
I think I'm hearing pretty good consensus to move forward, certainly with the northeast corner with Quick Trip, and then also go ahead to construction drawings. Probably have one more discussion about specifics of medians, north and south of that intersection. I think is that council's direction to move forward with the medians that we saw? Okay. And then we'll also probably schedule time for discussion the next few months about kind of what those design features can be at the various intersections to tie it all together. Not for this investment, but probably the next one. That's what we need, Mayor. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Rock chalk.
Rock chalk.
Go Eels. Next item on the agenda is the plan update for wastewater reaching.
Thank you, Mayor. I will ask Assistant City Manager Randy Reedy also join, since you've been involved with this as well. I'll only give the introduction that our staff has been working over the last few months to provide public information about the stormwater increases that went into effect on April 1st and will be applied for the bills that go out at the end, toward the end of April. And I think overall that communication has gone well. We knew when we brought those rates forward that one kind of customer group would have the biggest impact, and we knew that that would be our mobile home parks. And so Jackie and Randy have spent significant time meeting with each of our mobile home park managers, owners, and some residents to kind of talk about what that impact is. And we have an update for you and a recommendation for you related to that to help that implementation go even smoother.
Thank you. Good evening again. And I also want to draw your attention. We also have Sam Sessler, so thank you, Sam, for being here tonight. If those of you that don't know, she's our utility billing and customer service supervisor, doing a great job making these rates function in the system right now. I'm surprised she still has her hair today. Working really, really closely with the software to make sure it's working and ready to go. So thanks, Sam, for being included in the conversations with our manufactured home communities as well. We are getting ready for these to be implemented. I thought maybe Allison tricked me and turned it off. But no.
Is it not moving?
It is not moving.
I had the mouse on there.
I know. And then she ran. Thank you. So what we're hearing from this most impacted community is some concern, some support. Generally speaking, I think they understand the cost of service. They understand having to pass that on to their residents, but are also the advocate for the residents. And so we are hearing that it will be quite impactful to a number of them. And what we were hearing loud and clear was, wow, we really need more time to make this be properly communicated to all of our residents so that they have time to work with their systems for their billing to ensure that they're passing on the rates properly. Now that they understand why and they understand the background behind the process we went through to arrive at the rates that we did, they understand council has approved them, marching forward with your intentions there. A number of them have asked for additional time in order to make sure that everyone understands and they're doing it properly. The slides run right into some options here as Randy and I went through a lot of scenarios on how do we best, thank you, Jules, how do we best accommodate the wishes, understand the needs of this group that is impacted so heavily. What options might we have? Staff came up with a couple. We could continue to bill all accounts. As Jim mentioned, we're moving forward with implementing all of these rates unless we hear different direction today. Those rates will be effective on the bills that will go out later this month. You could consider some delay, and we'll talk about impacts here in the next couple of slides that would maybe help you consider this option. July 1st is our suggestion if you're so inclined to think about a possible delay that would allow them to have at least 60 days by the time we communicate any direction after tonight's meeting to them on the direction council wishes. That would give them a full 60 days plus to properly inform their residents. We did hear from one community that they require a 60-day notice before they're able to pass on any rates. So that would comply with that restriction that they have. And then also looking at another option, if council so desired, we could look at phasing for this particular impacted group because the rates are pretty large. So I have 4 properties. Don't have them by name, but these are scenarios that we walked through in meetings that we had in the last couple of weeks. If it's small, don't worry, I'll read it out to you. We have a property that is really high consumption. Their users are upwards of 9,000 gallons per unit on a winter average, significant usage. These folks that if you divided what their average winter bill is by the number of units, they're roughly paying the single family home currently $43.28. They would be going to $67.28. We did talk with them, had Justine Schoenbacher on the call as well to help bridge that water conservation benefit for them, offered to provide resources that they could pass on to residents too. Obviously they have some additional opportunity to reduce their consumption that would increase their bills as well, but on a very high consuming community, the increases are said to be very, very large. It's also very large for low consumption. So we have a mobile home community that is predominantly senior citizens, very, very low usage, maybe 1,900 gallons per month on average for the winter average. So on that commercial rate that they're currently paying, it's just $19.85 on the base, and they're paying very, very low consumption. Moving them to this residential structure that was recommended from this rate study means each of them will pay that base rate of $40.52. So they won't see anything additional for consumption base, but now that they're each paying a residential base rate, you can see they'll go from $7.43 or $7.50 up to $40.52. So impactful both on a high user and a very, very low user, both significantly impacted. We also have a scenario of a very large complex. I think a little bit higher than average use on that winter water average, maybe pay roughly $22 a month. They would be going up to almost $45 a month. So significant use there too. These bigger communities, now that each of them are going to be paying a base rate, and then they're splitting that back out to each of their homeowners, that will go up pretty substantially as well. And then we looked at it too. We had one that was a smaller complex, I think about 50 units. They probably average about $22 a month because, again, they're paying that one base rate. Their water consumption is about average, a little above average. So now they'll each be paying that base rate plus some consumption. They could go up to $45 from $22. So these were the kinds of scenarios that we were showing in our meetings to each of the communities, saying, we think your average bill is roughly $4,300, sampled good winter average use based on what they just used in the December through February most recent winter, and said, hey, here's what your average bill is currently. Once we change the structure, here's what we anticipate your bill could go up to. So we were very, very clear and transparent with, here's your usage, here's the number of accounts, or the number of units, and here's the difference of what your bill could go up to. And while most of them were very, very pleasant to have conversations with, we appreciated not getting screamed and yelled at. I thought we were going to, concerned. They see these dollar amounts, and it's very, very impactful.
And just to recap why this is happening, in our rate model, they were billed at a commercial rate, which didn't fit them well. It didn't work well for the city and funding equity. And so now they would be billed at the same rate, the same methodology that apartments and single-family homes will be billed at. So that's why this results.
And interestingly, they're not arguing about that. It's hard to argue that, it talks like a duck and walks like a duck. It's a duck. It's a residence.
Yeah.
And so the discussion before us today is you really want a timing and implementation and kind of easing this, which is easily a doubling for many of them and a quadrupling in one case. So it's a significant rate increase.
Absolutely. So again, in that kind of the three options that staff laid out for possible consideration, again, you could continue to move ahead and have everybody implement. Currently, with the rates or the bills that will go out later this month, it would provide the maximum revenue. Our rate study anticipated that those rates would go into effect in 2022. So the longer you were to delay, the potential of less revenue that the wastewater fund would have comes into play. This would be obviously your most consistent option because everybody would be billing at the same time, but wouldn't take into consideration the feedback that we've heard from this higher impacted group. Randy mentioned some of them are doubling or more, and the very high water users as well as the very low water users are most impacted. I think that's important for us as we went through this exercise with them to understand. The pros and cons of looking at a delayed implementation. If you're interested in this option, we're again recommending a July 1st date. It would give them half of the year. Those that are already locked into contracts for the year, it maybe is a compromise between their, potentially also losing out on some revenue if there are contracts or leases that have already renewed that they're not able to pass on. They're not losing an entire year. We're not losing an entire year. It might be a compromise about how we start this new process. It would allow them the 60-day plus and would give them some flexibility to accommodate those. We learned that some of them use, an out-of-state third-party utility billing company. So when we sent out notices saying, hey, great news, your wastewater rates are going to change. What we learned is one of those communities took out the bill, threw the notice, and it went nowhere. And so, having these meetings was, for one of these communities, the first that they had really understood the impact and really what this meant. Flagging to us, they're obviously going to need more time to plan for that the way that everybody else did. Potential delay to July 1st could mean revenue loss to the city of approximately $65,000. So instead of billing it April 1st, they're going July 1st because it is so large and impactful what those rates would be moving to. It would mean about $65,000 that the city wouldn't get in wastewater revenue during that time frame. And again, our rate structure is ready to go, almost ready to go. So it would take some additional staff time for us to manually bill these accounts if they're going at a new time frame. Something Sam's able to take care of for us, but just is a factor, I think. And this last option, try to think about what made sense if you were to phase it and try to help split that difference a little bit too. If council is interested in an option like this, what I would recommend is April 1st, we could say we won't make a change. Your bill will continue to bill as it is today. At July 1st, we would then start to bill at not a full base rate, maybe 75% of the base rate, but we would start to bill consumption. There will be two rates behind the scene if you care. So we could bill one at a certain percentage and one full. They don't have to both be all or nothing. That July 1st date would help their bills be about, it would split the difference, if you will. Instead of going, a doubling, it'd mean a 50% instead. So that would kind of help the overall increase of it. And then I would suggest by October 1st, we go ahead and we bill at 100% of what the rate should be, and that full consumption amount. So either way, they'll pay the consumption. It would just be some grace period for not billing the full base rate for all of the units. It would, again, provide that additional time for them to notify their residents, and it would allow for those communities to recover the increases in cost in portions so they could start to phase it into their leases as well that are renewing. The potential revenue loss, instead of being $65,000, would rise to $93,000 under this method, as opposed to just billing beginning April 1st. And again, it would take a little bit additional staff time, but again, this would just be for these 5 mobile home community accounts, which for us at least are billed in one account. So if one has 443 units, we don't have to bill each of them differently. So it really is just five accounts that we'd have to be adjusting and paying attention to manually that would be functioning different from the rest. Those are the options I think that we wanted to provide to you in some consideration of the feedback we're hearing. Is there anything else I missed from those meetings?
No, just Jackie and Sam have done a great job, and the fact that you're hearing from this one category of user, I think, speaks volumes to the information that's gone out. Of course, we will hear from some. There'll be some residential and commercial changes, some unexpected changes, perhaps over the next month or two, that folks will be reaching out to you and to us about. We're prepared and have started with this group to talk to them about water conservation. And it's a meaningful message, a way for them to bring these bills down by dropping their indoor use pretty significantly. So prepared to work with them, but I think overall it's a good news scenario. We just have a significant user group, but one user group of our entire community that is being impacted so severely.
So when does the rest of our, water bills increase? Are we all scheduled for the increase on April 1st?
Yes.
This month.
So I just want to say that, I mean, with that in mind, all of our bills are going up.
Right.
So I would like to see something go up for them in April along with our bills.
I agree with you. I kind of look, sorry to cut you off. I agree with you. Everybody else's bills going up. I hate to put it in this kind of a term, but from the past, however long they've been on that motorcycle, it was kind of a bonus for you guys. You guys got the cheaper bills because you were on it. Now it's just kind of catch-up time. I'm with you. Everybody else's bills going up too.
When did you all have the meetings with those 5? Because I'm assuming they're not all rental properties either. You'll have homeowners and rentals in there. So technically, okay, with the rentals, yes, you do have to give some type of notice if there's any rate change. But homeowners, you know, I'm assuming, I could be wrong, that would be a little different. So because even when you guys had the first meeting and told them this is gonna change, right then they could have been notifying their residents, homeowners and renters. So that's part of one of my questions, and just wondering when that was.
Yeah, sure. We've just had those meetings recently. We didn't have any last week, but 2 weeks prior. So in the last 3 weeks is when they received all this communication. And we thought they really had gotten that first letter we sent out in January. Our intention was to give everybody that with their letter. And so we weren't aware until the very first meeting that they didn't understand the impact and that all of their residents potentially didn't get that direct.
So for me, I mean, I get the logic that, you know, we sent out communication to the mobile home park owners. Granted, they didn't disseminate that information down. And mobile home park owners, people that live there or rent, that's affordable housing. So they're either some of them are on fixed budgets and low income. So for me, granted, yes, you know, I see myself, I can pay, you know, April 1st, but again, people that are in the specific, you know, income bracket or that are on fixed income, it's different. And only that if the mobile home park owners didn't notify them, it's unfortunate to them. And only that, they're residents also, and they also deserve to be heard and listened to. And for me, I think option 2 would be great, just for that reason. I do know that a lot of the mobile home park structures are going from, like, they're already in residential, that residential structure. It's taken us a while. So yes, they have had that lower cost for a significant amount of time, considering most mobile home parks pay the residential. But I do think that we should provide that 60-day notice.
Who's next?
I don't know how I feel about this one.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's that pragmatic part of me that goes, well, of course, if we're paying, everybody should lean in and pay. And then there's that part of me that thinks about, like, if my grandparents were living there and paid $7 and all of a sudden their bill's $40, particularly because that one just hits hard because they're not using a ton. Right. The ones that already use a lot and it goes up, there's consumption tied to that it's easier to look at, well, if you limited your consumption and all of that, but others don't have that. Having said that, then I go back to that pragmatic piece. And so the owners of a lot of these mobile home parks, I'm assuming I know some of them, at least the parks themselves. Do they own parks in other municipalities? And do other municipalities do it the way we're going to be doing it?
Yes.
So that's where my struggle is too, because I look at it and go, well, shame on you, because you should have known better. So do I feel bad for the impact that has on residents? Absolutely. I would feel bad on any resident to increase rates to that level, hands down. It doesn't help that there may be income limitations there. But on the other hand, if those mobile home park owners own parks in other municipalities and they do it this way, it's a difficult pill to swallow. I don't know that I am able to clearly articulate what option I feel is best, and I apologize to you for that, but I don't know what I feel is best. I support the decision of council, and if you come down to one person, I'll make it.
Thanks, Lauren.
Well, thank you.
I just don't know, and I don't want to.
Well, see, the thing is, mobile home parks, yeah, the owners, they own in different municipalities, but the thing is, our structure was the way it is. So it's not like just because a different municipality charges a specific way doesn't mean that they're going to be like, okay, then Evans, just so happens that the cost in Evans are less, so it's like a plus for them. And every single municipality works differently. And not only that, there's so many structures everywhere else outside of just that cost that are so different amongst different municipalities. So it's like, it's just different rate structures. And so you can't.
Let me ask a question and see what the council thinks. this, and I don't know if it works, it's more of a question for you. We all know where I stand in this world. I'm not for the government paying people's bills. I'm not for the government. But we did get something called Arpa. I'm not for the citizens of Evans. What if we did the delay till July 1st? It was a $65,000 deficit. I'm not for the rest of our citizens of Evans with our tax money covering that $65,000. But what if we took $65,000 out of ARPA, which was 360 million people, cost everybody less than a half a penny to pitch in and cover that cost? Because I don't think it's fair to the rest of the citizens of Evans to fit that $65,000 bill, which is in a sense what we'd be doing.
It's what we have been doing.
Right.
I
was gonna
But
say,
I am okay with taking $65,000 out of ARPA and having the whole United States pay those people's portion of the water bill for 3 months.
Can that be done?
I think we would still have to follow the original piece where
Where it
it's
doesn't
all
look like-
revenue
yeah.
capture. So it's all coming out of the same bucket then, whether it's a sewer expansion, whether it's police station, whether you want it to go to the wastewater fund for this purpose.
I'm
It
thinking
can then
out of
be-
5.3 million, 65,000.
But here's the one thing that does get me about something like that is they're not going to pass that on to the residents. It sounds like it sounds like most of that savings will go to the people who own
Which
the.
I'm not for.
And I'm not exactly. That's where I go. Well,
It was just a thought. I'm
It
not saying
doesn't-
I'm
that-
for that. It was just a question.
So on your last option, on the July and October, with putting a 75% and 100%, can we just increase it 25% starting April 1st each month?
like that.
25%.
25% April 1st,
For 4
25%
months until
Over
it
4
gets.
months it gets.
until it gets to where it needs to be.
Absolutely. Our system will allow us. Sam might be losing her hair, but we can
She's
go
gonna
in and
look
we
like
can
the Kathy
phase
cartoon.
whatever,
Sounds a lot
whatever
for you.
part of that you wanted.
She didn't.
What would it be
She
the
didn't.
last
Yeah, she's like,
She didn't like that.
Well, it would be less than the 93 because we would start to recoup
But would
a
it be
portion
less?
of it.
Would it be less than the 65?
Probably, don't you think about the same? Because
I think
April,
it would-
May, June, July.
Yeah,
That
4
puts
months,
you to July
25% per month.
Be about the same as doing.
I have one last dumb question, and you may have told us this before. When you're billing those properties, are they billed as a whole or are they individually metered?
They are billed as a whole.
Okay.
And so they will then be getting, credit for 4,000 gallons per unit, and we bill everything above that. And they have millions of gallons of consumption each month.
Because I know how much my buildings use, and it does help when you say, hey, we can help lower your water bill if your toilet stops running, call us, we'll come fix that, or, it'll help with water conservation in the end, I think, but knowing that they're billed as a whole.
We did have one community at least tell us that they have individual meters. So while it's not our water meter, but they have their sub meter. So they were going to work pretty closely with Sam so that we've got their good consumption too. We're making sure that we're billing them what's really being used, and then that will help them pinpoint those folks that are using more than the 4,000.
And then
for the water
another question for you. Do we know out of the 5 mobile home parks, because some mobile home parks are structured, they have set fees, of usage. What is that? Do we know if they have set fees for those specific? Well, I mean, you had them up here, so they don't, because you had like the 723 and then specific ones.
Right.
It varies.
They
So
all
so it
bill
varies.
differently.
But I'm just curious, like if it's 723, is it 723 across all households? Like every single household pays that same fixed
I
amount?
don't think so, and I don't think that each of our 5 communities do it the same.
Okay.
Okay, first, let me tell you what Weld County told me when I found out that I was paying taxes on a 2-story house for 10 years. Basically, tough luck. That being said, when we were on the water audit committee, there was some feeling that there's some disparity in the rates. And to me, I was a little bit flabbergasted to find out that these were not considered residential units, and that they have been paying for the last 50 years that I've almost lived in Evans. They've been paying ridiculously low rates compared to what I am. So, yeah, it's a shock, and I don't feel like especially the residents of the one park. But it makes me wonder if that was one of the reasons why Cove Creek chose to expand here was because they knew that they were kind of beating the system on that. I don't know.
May I say one more thing?
Please.
I had that internal debate. Pragmatic segment.
Figure something
But
out.
here's the thing. In thinking about it, I'm fairly certain the residents are not going to see the impacts of whatever we decide. It sounds like if they're contracted with the mobile home park at a fee per month, the mobile home park will see the savings and the residents will not. For that reason, I would like to implement the rates immediately because the residents will see the impact in whatever date they start billing or their contract is up or whatever that might be. But I still think for our residents, it's going to be immediate. I don't see it being, the mobile home park, I don't believe, will show, okay, we're going to give you this much of a credit and this much of a credit till you're there. I think they're going to go, we're going to bank that and then you're going to get charged the full amount when your contract's up or whatever that might be. For that reason, I would like it to be implemented on April 1st.
It's kind of what I was thinking as well after thinking about it as well, because I'm like, it's not, when Tammy asked that question, how are they billed? Is it as a whole or each in there? It's like that's where it's going to happen. Exactly there. It's just like with that, knowing that, it's, it should.
Do we know? I mean, how many of those 5 are billed as a whole?
That's why we have these discussions.
They have one. The reason that these were commercial is because they have 1 meter for the whole park.
Okay.
Even as compared to multifamily, who still has several meters, they might be per building. That's why this has always been the way it was. So it will be the total charge for the whole park, and then just an allocation going to each resident. Correct?
Divide that by the number of units.
Yeah. So.
Well, yeah, because I mean, it's roughly 1,500 households with all 5 parks. Because if we're charging that rate, give or take, I think. But that is true. I do agree. Because technically, even if we do or we do not start April 1st, regardless, they still, even if we start April 1st, they still have to give them a 60-day notice. Right. So they will be paying the same rate until the 60 days. So it'll be April, May until June. That's when it'll be implemented for mobile park. So technically, they will have that cushion anyway. If it makes sense, because they have to. The residents have to. Because if they're a rental, that's a caveat. Because if they're a rental, they require that 60-day notice. But if they're an owner, it doesn't. It starts automatically.
They are, to our knowledge, all of them renting their pads. Most of them own their units, and then they rent their pads.
Well, yeah. If they rent, like they have a tenant. Like if it's because you can own it and you're renting, and the pad. That's the difference.
So is that kind of where we're all at? Go.
Yeah.
Started now.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have let them know back in January when they got the letter. That's my personal opinion.
But let them know we really thought about it. I mean, it's not like we arrived to that. Like,
I'm sure in a couple months
Sam
we'll be able to
now,
tell them when they're here.
That was something else on the water art committee. We were discussing something. This one gal goes, "Well, I didn't know that." And we said, "Well, it was in your last water bill." And she says, "Oh, I never looked at that stuff. I just throw it away." So if the business is throwing away the notices, that's poor practice.
I've never looked at
Mine just
I don't look at it.
mine says auto pay. I don't look at it.
Yeah.
I signed up for like I still get a
auto pay just goes.
All right, we're going to skip item 6 tonight. We're just going to stick with item 5 for the next 8 minutes. Jim, can you guys do that?
I certainly can.
Declaration of City Council vacancy.
Thank you, Mayor. So title's a little misleading. We're not declaring a vacancy tonight because council doesn't have a vacancy yet. We are planning to bring forward the declaration of a council vacancy for action on your April 19th, your next meeting, after most of you are sworn in. But tonight, we hope that we can get a jump on the process so that we can have it ready to meet the schedule we think you might like to have after that declaration of vacancy. As you're aware, probably, our charter requires that the council shall appoint an eligible person to fill a council vacancy within 90 days. After Mayor-elect Clark is sworn in as mayor, we will then have that vacancy in Ward 2. So tonight we're just wanting to kind of outline a process, see if you have anything else we should be thinking about, any redirection for us if you'd like to see something different. But this process generally follows what we've done in the past. We've had a council vacancy. So with this, just in terms of a calendar, April 19th, council could declare a vacancy in Ward 2. With your direction tonight, we can go ahead and get postcards ready for mailing on April 20th, the next day. The content would be in both English and Spanish. It would go to active registered voters in Ward 2. We would also be advertising the vacancy on Facebook, Twitter, website, all the ways that we can think of. We would have the applications also available in our clerk's office as well as online. And then we would also at the same time, staff would be communicating with all of council to solicit interview questions that you would like to have answered by the applicants. So then May 18th, we're suggesting that we would have, so after almost a month, almost I think 4 weeks, you would have those applications due. Then we'd have packets out to council the next day, where you would then have the weekend there to look at the packets. We'd then schedule interviews for May 23rd or 24th, depending on the number of candidates that we have. And I talked about questions. Our thought is that once council members get all of their questions they would like to see to the clerk, we'd have a few weeks to work with the mayor and the mayor pro tem on kind of finalizing those questions. And then all of that would set you up, and our goal was to set it up for the possibility for appointment on June 7th. You see that we would have some costs for mailing. We do have the postcard content attached. If council would like to offer any comment there. That's the recommended process. We'd like your feedback and direction to move forward. That's all I have, Mayor.
I'm going to stay out of this one so you guys have that conversation.
I know when you and I discussed it a few days ago, I was fine with the timeline and everything, and that worked for me. So
I'm good with this.
I'm good with it too. My only concern is we've been faced with at work our printers being unable to supply paper because there's national paper pulse shortage. So I just want to make sure we can actually get postcards out, and then if we can't, is that required?
I see our clerk, Julie Kamka.
I have already spoken with the print vendor, Minuteman Press, and they don't have the high gloss paper available. Sure. It's more of a matte finish, but it is still the thicker postcard paper.
That was my thank you.
Covered.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anyone else, Fred? Good.
Thank you, council.
Got about 3 minutes. Anyone have anything to discuss? All right.